You are now listening to Testimonies with Terry.
All right, guys. Well, I am here with Jason Justice. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I know you through Wrestling for the Faith and Chad Lale. I got to hear you on their podcast, and you gave kind of an abridged version of your testimony. And I think that was either earlier this year or last year. And I was just like, man, like someday I need to have you on my show. And we got to serve together at the Remnant Youth Retreat this past summer, got to meet in person. And man, just hearing you speak to the youth and sharing your story, again, just super inspiring. And we talked more about getting you on the show, and here we are. So, man, I'm excited to do this thing.
Me too, man. We were talking about that youth thing. That youth thing floored me. It was just, that was really my first time stepping into a youth thing.
Same.
You know, I had spoken to several adults or whatever, but I was nervous going up there. But man, I walked away probably blessed more than anybody else. It was.
Yeah, it was, man, the Holy Spirit just moved. And if you guys want to hear more about the Remnant Youth Retreat, go to Wrestling for the Faith's podcast. Jason and I, along with Chad and Casey, Jonna, Coach, and Denna, we all got together to kind of just recap the weekend. What a powerful weekend, man. And man, I'm kind of counting down the days till next year to do it again.
Excited, man. I'm really excited. It was, again, I mean, I could go on for days about that thing, man. It was neat.
Yeah.
And I actually got to baptize my son there, so that was really awesome too. So
powerful moment, man. Powerful moment. Well, dude, you're a powerful man. Jesus has done so much in your life, and I think we should just get into this. So, Jason, we always started at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and it's funny because I lost my mother around 9 years old, right? So Spartanburg, I don't have a lot of memory of Spartanburg, but that's where I was born and raised up till I was about 9 years old until my mother passed away. And then I was moved to Greenville, South Carolina, in with my actual real father.
Okay. So your parents were split from the beginning, it sounds like.
My mom and dad got divorced, like from one of the stories I was told, they got divorced when I was around 2 years old. And apparently my father and my mother, it was pretty nasty divorce. And my mother had ended up getting remarried. And my stepdad at that time adopted me. So my name was Jason Brown for several years. Justice is actually my mother's maiden name. And I was Jason Brown for so many years. And she would let my dad come and visit me on weekends. But she referred to him as my uncle. He was my Uncle Jerry, you know. And but it was weird because he would come down on weekends. We'd go stay in a hotel and just have we'll go to the mall, we'll go to the movies, and just share time together, And I always thought it was odd for an uncle to be doing that with a nephew. It wasn't. I don't know, it wasn't normal, I guess. But so after my mother passed away, my stepdad had gotten remarried, and he married a psycho, bro. I mean, this lady was really just pure evil, and I went through a lot of abuse with her. I mean, she hated me. She was just trying to. She knew I was the stepchild, but I didn't even know I was a stepchild at that moment,
Yeah.
And I had a sister too, so they treated me like crap and treated my sister like an angel. So because she hated me, and she was really from what I understand, she was bipolar. And so she would go from like smiling to zero. And all of a sudden she's breaking glasses, she's throwing things, I mean, dude, she used to send me to bed without dinner. I mean, but by the time I ended up, I didn't even know my dad was my dad. So when I went through this, would steal stuff from my stepfather, plant it in my closet, and blame me for it. And as I remember as a child thinking how much I hated her because I really thought I was going to die because I had never been treated like that in my life, and because my mother treated me with love and care. And when she was living, my stepdad did as well. It's like the whole thing changed dimensions, right?
Yeah.
Mm. So I went through. I'm not sure if you want me to keep going on the story, but I mean,
Yeah, why don't we pause there for a second? I want to back up. How did your mom die, Jason?
my mother she had congestive heart failure, and she had I want to say 3 or 4 heart attacks, and the last one it got the best of her, you know.
Man, man,
But
what was
the irony of that is years later, I had heard rumors. I can't. There's no truth to the fact that I can prove that my stepdad. My mom had took so much medication, she kept it in a shoebox. I mean, it was just that much. And from what I was told, that my stepdad would start feeding her medicine, and I was told that he played a part in her death. But again, that's neither here nor there because it was never proven. But either way, she's gone.
yeah, man, what was that like for you, 9 years old, losing your mom?
Oh, that was the beginning of my hell. I mean, literally, that I've years later now that I went through rehabs and a lot of self checking myself, and a lot of times when you're a drug addict and you got these issues, you got to get to the root of the issue. I mean, you're a therapist, you know that.
Yep.
You got to get to the root of the issue, and that was the beginning of the root of my issue. Was when my mother passed at 9 years old. That's when I started getting kicked around, and I was a mama's boy, like legit. I mean, I'm man enough and okay with it. I mean, my mother, she spoiled me. She loved me. I mean, I remember Saturday morning cartoons. We eating cereal, sitting on the couch. Just I talk too much about it, I'll probably get worked up. But because that's one of those memories that, as much as I want to keep it, I suppress it a lot. It's the only. It's like a survival. I don't know. Maybe I like to talk about it. I don't know. But as a 9-year-old boy, it was tough, man. It was. I feel like I lost the world. You
Yeah.
know, my mother was my best friend. She was amazing woman, man, and she's the reason that I was even ever put in church. I remember hearing that song by Elevation Worship, that "Talking to Jesus."
Yep.
Dude, that song, it's almost like it took it from my childhood. Because I remember Wednesday nights legitimately having arguments about what I was going to wear to church with my mom. And she wanted to dress me up with polo shirts and, all this little clothes that I didn't want to wear. And I was just always, I felt like that was my song from my mom when it came out. But because of her, I know God now, you know. So it all starts with a seed, man.
Yeah. No, that's
And
for sure. And so with mom passing, again, your dad was in your life, but you thought he was your uncle this whole time. And so I'm wondering, throughout your childhood, did you question, did you ask, did you wonder, hey, where is my dad?
well, I was always told that my stepfather was my dad for years. But I noticed, from what I understand, towards the end of my mother's death, I mean life, I can remember, and it's so weird because I'm 46 years old now, but I can still remember, and I can see in my mind my mother and my uncle was behind closed doors having a conversation with me, and they kissed on the mouth, and it was just weird for me, because when you say it out loud, it kind of makes my mom look like a tramp, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
it wasn't that. It was, again, man, a lot of the stuff that I know is all, I think I was a 9-year-old kid. So it's just hearsay or what, somebody's told me. But from what my understanding was, my mother and my uncle, which was my daddy, were talking about getting back together. And her and my stepfather were having a lot of issues and they were going to lead to a divorce. again, don't know how much, truth's behind that. Again, I was a 9-year-old kid, but I do remember that day because I thought then, this is strange, but
Yeah.
it wasn't until later, because it wasn't until later until I realized who my dad was. Like, I was probably close to 10 years old, and that, when I get into the story, you'll be able to understand and put all the pieces together because it's, it's definitely, it could make a movie. Definitely say that.
Yeah, for sure. And so I don't know what would make more sense than Jason, if you want to go into when you found out your dad was your dad, or if you want to kind of go back into stepmom coming into your life. Chronologically, what was kind of first?
Well, what was first was stepmom coming in my life, and honestly, I guess you know how the spirit talks to you, man. When I just said that, I look back now, and as much as it was a hell for my life, her coming in my life, I look now, and God just showed me just a second, Jason, that was a blessing. That was a blessing. I mean, yes, you went through some hell, but had that never happened, I wouldn't know who my real father is now.
Yeah.
All of that pushed. I'm a firm believer everything that happens starts here, and in some way, shape, or form, it's pushed. And it's just like if you go to the bottom of a cup and you got sand in it, and you push it up, it's going to overflow, right? So I believe it pushed me into where I am now with my father. But long story short, man, she came in my life and she was very abusive. I mean, she would make me strip naked and lay across the bed. She would beat me with hickories. I'd have blood running down my legs, and she would come up in my room in the middle of the night. I remember one night she came in. I was dead in a dead sleep. Light flips on. She snatches the cover off of me. Starts just cussing me out. A 9-year-old boy, talking about my mother was nothing but a whore. It was this, she was that, she was this. That was the first time in my life I struck a woman at 9 years old. When she did that, I slapped her. And next thing I know, my stepdad's up running in the room. I'm getting threw around, jacked up against walls, threw across the room, and just, it was almost like I was getting beat up by two adults at 9 years old. And so I went to school the next day. It was actually after that I went to school the next day, and that's when they got me out of school. Literally walked me out with my ear, took me home, walked me in my bedroom, and pulled down my stepdad's watch. It was a gold watch. Now my stepmother stood on a stool in the closet and reached back to get it. I was a short 9-year-old kid. I couldn't even have put it there, you know. But then I was told that I wasn't welcome there no more. That I was going to, they were kicking me out at 9 years old. And I went to school the next day. I came home. There was a suitcase with my name on it sitting in the carport. And I remember sitting there just crying. I had no idea what was happening, And my stepdad come out of the house, put the suitcase in the back seat of the car. And I remember crying, asking, "Where are we going? Where are we going?" And I remember it was Asheville Highway in Spartanburg. I remember driving down the road and turning, and my cousin and my aunt, they all lived here. But man, they were so poor. Like, I mean, when you got a version of, and it's not me derogatory in my family, but you got nasty people and the ones that have cockroaches and all this stuff. That's that kind of life, which I hadn't lived in that type of life before this time. But my stepfather pulls up. He says, "You're going to be staying with your Aunt Susie now." And I just started crying. And he said, "Get out." He didn't walk me to the door. I remember standing in that yard holding a suitcase, bawling my eyes out as he drove off. And I look back now and I think, man, my son's 9 years old right now. You met him.
Yeah.
That was the age I was at. And I couldn't imagine doing that to my kid. I mean, blood or not, I couldn't imagine doing it to your kid or anybody's kid.
Yeah.
You know, just set somebody out, and it's just like, bye. So everything I knew from 2 years old to 9 years old, it just got shut up in a minute. And
Yeah.
it's just lost my mom, and and now now I feel like I've lost my dad. And so I stayed with my aunt Susie and her kids, and it was just really bad. I mean, they couldn't afford to take care of me. They barely afforded themselves. So then my grandmother reached out, and at this time, though, my grandmother was an alcoholic and a pillhead. So, but I don't want to dog her because she tried. I mean, it was more than what I mean. My stepdad dropped me off. Whether she's a drunk or not, she tried. So anyway, I went with my grandmother. She got us an apartment, and I remember in this apartment, it was the first time I kind of felt at home since I had left. But my grandmother was drunk all the time and passed out. Literally, I mean, I can still close my eyes and see her laying on the side of the couch now. And I would be hungry, and there was a store right down below the apartment. I would go in the store and I'd walk through and I would steal stuff, steal candies and stuff like that. And like next door to that store, you know how somebody's moving a house and they put it on blocks. There was a house that somebody had moved to this lot, sitting on blocks, and I would climb underneath this house and sit there and eat what I stole. And there was one day I went through there, and I climbed under there, and I heard this noise, and I was really startled. And I turned around, and it was the guy that worked at the store. I can still see him to this day. He was a black guy. He said, "My name's Fred," and he said, "I just want you to know, you don't have to steal anything no more." And he gave me a plate of food, and he said, "If you're hungry," he said, "just let me know." And
Wow.
it's people, I look back now, being where I am, I think
Yeah.
that was Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. I never, that memory would hurt. But yeah, it was tough, but I remember that. I mean, like I said, his name's Fred. That's all I know. I remember it to this day, though, because his act of kindness, his love. Yeah, they didn't know me. I was just this little white neighborhood kid. I lived in the projects back then. And I was probably one of the few only white kids around there, and he had no idea who I was, man. And he could have had me sent off. He could have had me locked up. Could have had pressed charges. But he stopped what he was doing and went and bought me food and brought it to me because
Wow, man.
he knew what I had been doing. And yeah. So after a while, when my uncle, my mother's brother, would he'd come by to visit once in a while, and he had noticed that my grandma was always out of it. So he tried to help me, and I moved in with him and his wife, and my aunt and my cousin, which is a lot older than I was. He's the one. My cousin's the one who ended up teaching me how to play football, which is really neat.
Yeah.
But so when I moved in there, I worked on his farm, shoveling crap and baling hay and just, you know, 9, 10-year-old boy that's out here working my tail off. But I'm glad that happened to me because it ingrained something in me. But his wife started getting jealous because he would slip me $20 here and there, just for my hard work or whatever. And she just couldn't handle me being there, and she told him it's either him or me. Guess who got the boot again?
Oh man.
So I went from there to my other uncle's house, who had like three different kids who were brats. I mean, bro, they're my cousins and I love them, but they were something special. And we would always bump heads, and they would always make fun of my mama being dead and this kind of thing. And so it would end up in fist fights and this, that. And of course, now it's time for Jason to go again. But I remember before I left, we had took a beach trip. And I remember riding down the road in an old Falcon. It was a piece. But I remember sitting in the back, and my uncle was driving, and he used to take Xanax all the time. And I remember watching him nod as he was driving, and I was terrified. I was like, "Oh my god, he's going to go to sleep. I'm going to get killed," you know. And I remember we ended up going to a KOA campground at the beach, and I remember going to the shower house, and I would just turn the shower on, literally, and I would just sit in the shower, and I'd sit there and cry, And I was just thinking of, I got to figure. I mean, I'm a kid. I don't even know how to be an adult, And it's like I felt hopeless because like I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do. And for some reason, I decided I wanted to write my Uncle Jerry a letter. And so I wrote him a letter, and I sent it to him. I didn't tell nobody about it. I did know how to mail letters. And when I sent him that letter, I explained to him, what was going on, and asked him if can you help me, this, that. And at that time, my dad he was driving a truck over the road. He was out of state, out of town all the time. And when he found out what was happening, he came down. He didn't ask. He walked in the door. He said, "Grab your stuff and let's go." And when we left, he quit. I think this is back in the late '80s, right at '90s, right? Yeah, late '80s. He was making back at that time. He was making over 60 something $1,000 a year, which was really good money back then. He quit that job to go work a minimum wage job, just so he could raise me. Yeah, so
Wow.
he gave up everything. And as time went on, and things started coming together, I started asking questions, and the truth came out that he was my daddy. And I that was he's one of the greatest men I've ever known. I just lost him this past June, but my dad saved my life, man. I've always told everybody he was my hero, and because he was.
Man. Dude,
Because
that is
without him, I'd have been dead,
yeah.
uh, or abused, or I would have been doing drugs a lot earlier. I'm sure, because my mother's side of the family. Again, it's hard for me not to love them because I grew up around them, but they're all a bunch of drug heads, a bunch of drunks. All they want to do is fight all the time, in and out of jail. The last name Justice in Spartanburg, South Carolina, at one time, if you got pulled over by a cop and you said your name was Justice, they automatically pulled you out and detained you. And so when I lived up here, and I took the last name Justice in honor of my mother, because I guess if I'm honest, I began to hate my stepfather. I didn't want his last name. And when I had moved in with my uncle that I worked with, he had my name changed to Justice. And it's funny because they're like, "How do you and your mom have the same maiden name?" Well, so
And that's
I don't know what my last name should be.
right. Yeah, and that's cool that you explained that, because obviously, and we'll get into your story, but you were a wrestler at one time, and so in my mind, I always thought Jason Justice was like your gimmick name, your wrestling name. And so to hear that, no, that's like your mother's maiden name. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it's yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because when I was wrestling, man, I went by a name called Scotty Wren, the Ticking Time Bomb, right? Every promoter that I ever ran into, I remember I did a show for TNA, and Bill Barons was introducing me to Jeff Jarrett and his daddy Jerry. And when they told him my real name, they both looked at me and they was like, "Are you an idiot?" They said, "Dude, you were born with a gimmick name." And he said, "You need to stick to that." He said, "Because nobody can take that from you." And at the time I was still, green and didn't really know what was going on, and it made more sense. But right towards the end of my wrestling career, I actually dropped the Scotty Wren and went by Jason Justice.
Good
It was
move.
pretty, yeah.
Man, that's amazing. Going back to a couple of pieces of your story earlier here, Jason, before we go on, I'm really curious. Did you ever have any contact with your stepdad or stepmom after they booted you out? And did you ever get any explanation or find out why they kind of targeted you? Why you? Why the abuse?
I don't know. Okay, I'll start with this. I never got an answer for why they targeted me. I mean, and they showed my sister favoritism. I mean, she was like God's angel, and I was just the devil. And as far as contact with them after all that went down, I remember I think I was probably about 17 or 18 years old, and they used to sell merchandise at a flea market. And I made it a point to go to this flea market because now I'm grown. And in my mind back then, I'm grown. Why don't you put your hands on me now? I mean, I can take care of me now.
Yep.
That was kind of my whole sole purpose of going there, was to give them that opportunity. And I remember walking up, and he didn't even recognize me. And I started picking up stuff, kind of like I was looking at his merchandise, and I looked up at him, and he kept looking at me, and he'd turn away. He'd look at me, he'd turn away. And his name was Lee. I said, "Lee." He looked at me, he goes, "Do I know you?" I said, "I would hope so. You raised me the first couple years of my life." He goes, "Jason?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just wanted to shake you." And it's funny because I went there with intention on probably punching him in the face.
Sure.
But I guess God knew what he was doing even then in my roughest day, because I looked at him and it's like when I seen him and the look on his face, I wasn't mad no more. I said, "I just wanted to come by and let you know that I turned out okay." You know, and I turned around and the woman that abused me was selling flowers in the place next door. I walked by her. And I said, "Hey, ma'am, hope you have a wonderful day." And I just kept walking. Well, then I turned and saw them talking, so I knew they were talking about me.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing how even then God didn't allow me to step stupid.
Right.
And but later on in life, probably several years later, I got wind that he was up around my hometown looking for me. That he was wanting to apologize and make things right. But I was never in contact with him anymore, and he ended up passing away. So I don't know if he was just trying to make amends before he went on, but
Yeah.
either way, I mean, all is well, because even now, man, I mean, I am who I am in Christ now because of everything I've been through. And if I've not learned nothing over the past couple years, my story matters.
Hmm.
My story is giving people hope through Jesus, man, because man, I'm not supposed to be here, Terry.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Um,
glad you are, man. The other question that I had before we pick up where we left off, your relationship with your sister, what did that look like once you were kicked out of the house?
it didn't exist. I didn't see my sister for several years. It was on up until after I was driving a car. So I was at least 15, 16 years old. And I went down and met up with her a couple of times. Drove her and some of her friends around. It was weird because it was like we still knew each other, but we didn't know each other. And after that, it was just kind of a big, long, several year sabbatical. And she was in a motorcycle accident. And I remember going, I got somebody called me and told me about it. So I rushed down to make sure because at one point they didn't know if she was going to make it or not. And, but she ended up pulling through and she's doing really well for herself now. But we didn't see each other for several years. And I guess around 2010, we reconnected on Facebook, and we just started conversating back and forth. And I visited with her. It's probably been a couple of years now, but we talk a lot on Facebook, and I'll go down every so often and just stop in. But it's not really a relationship there. I mean, it's an acknowledgement type relationship.
Yeah.
It's like well, I gotta love her. She's my sister. But the truth of the matter that is, man, and then here's another let you know how crazy my life is. My sister was actually my cousin. My mother's sister was a junkie too, and when she had my sister, my mom adopted her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as far as actually blood relatives, I'm a single child. But I was, I was born and raised with her being my sister.
Yep.
Even though blood wise she was only my cousin. So
Man. What
there's
a
another twist of fate for my chaotic life.
yeah, man, what a crazy life. So then going back to when your dad told you, hey, I'm not your uncle, I'm your dad, man, what was that moment like for you? Again, losing your mom, thinking your stepdad was your dad and all the abuse that you endured and all these homes that you lived in. And now you finally got stability, but not just stability with your dad. What was
It,
that like for you?
it's funny you asked that, man, because immediately, I mean, I remember that. To this day, I remember the moment. After he said what he said, it was not even a word said. I just embraced. I hugged him and just squeezed him. And he just sat there and held me. And whew,
That's beautiful, man. Sounds like
yeah,
that's what you were wanting your whole life is, man,
all on.
can't someone just love me?
Yeah, it's all on. Pulling up some old scars, brother. Some old
Yeah.
wounds there. But yeah, I mean, it was, man, my dad was so awesome, man. When I think of him, I think of all the random stuff that he and I done. We would go, we would. He had like a, just a van, like a work van, right? And we would go and sleep in the work van. And it sounds crazy to say it out loud, but those are the moments I remember because my dad never slept with a shirt on, even outside in the freezing cold. And I remember laying in that van and my head being underneath right near his armpit, just snowed up and how warm it was and just how much love I felt, man. It was just,
Mm.
I tell people all the time, I've lived with the richest of the richest and I've lived with the poorest of the poor. And I got way much more love living with the poor, because it was more about relationships with them, but it was almost like a surprise Christmas party when I found out he was my dad,
Yeah.
because he was always so cool with me, man, and he treated me like his son, even though I didn't think I didn't know it, but it was really awesome, man. It was probably one of the best days of my life
Yeah. Well,
because
man,
everything after that, man, it's just better. I mean, I still had some days, but for the most part, it was just better.
yeah. Well, man, what a beautiful moment. And I just think of the goodness of God with that, right? Just knowing that you needed your father in your life, and here he comes, like you said, just kind of waltzing in the door, taking you, no questions asked, we're going. And to see the restoration in that relationship is just the goodness of God right there. So you're with your dad. What's kind of the next step of your journey here? What's the next chapter of your story here, Jason?
Well, I started playing football, started playing sports in school, and in the midst of that, I got to hanging with some wrong kids, and used to have a lot of weekend parties. A lot of underage drinking. A lot of I would start drinking, then we started smoking pot, and then I would get I would get caught and get punishment on the football team, and which made me want to do it more. And my senior year of high school, I had opportunities to play college football, but I got into a guy that did cocaine and decided I wanted to try that. And I got more invested in a party life and a drug life that I wasted my college opportunities. But yeah, I ended up wasting college opportunities to go play sports and get a free education. You know, Said, hey, I'd rather be a drug addict right now. But so yeah, I guess high school. I had a good childhood from teenagers. I was the problem then. I mean, my dad. Well, I say that my dad was an enabler for me. Even to the day he died. I mean, it's sad, but I look back, and I think when I lost my dad, it was because he's always been my safety net, no matter what. I mean, it don't matter if I was doing the right thing, the wrong thing. He would always be there, and he would always catch me. And if it was the wrong thing, we'd talk about it at home. But for the most part, my high school years were good. I had a lot of freedom, which turned out to be a bad thing because I done what I wanted to do, which was stupid stuff. And I think everything started stacking up on me in high school because I knew that I was approaching graduation, and I started looking back. I'd lost my mom. I've lost my sister. Pretty much because she wasn't in my life, and I see all these families around me, and it would crush me, man. I mean, I never would really talk about it, but I was very envious, very jealous, very I wanted that. That's all I ever wanted was. You said it a while ago. I just wanted to be loved. I mean, yeah, I got that from my dad, but at this moment, and now I don't have a mom. And all that's kind of starting to. It's weird as it sounds. It didn't really start settling in until I was in high school. It was kind of a blur from 10 to 15, 10 to 13 ish, and I guess because I was being kicked around so much and going through things, but I think the heaviness of it set in when I was in high school, and I got to where I was drinking a lot and popping pills, and then by my senior year I was doing cocaine, losing scholarships. So that's kind of where that went, and I had to go straight to work after high school.
Yeah, man. What do you think it was about joining that group of people, getting into drugs, drinking? Do you think it was, just wanting to kind of fill that void of not having your mom there? What was it about that stuff that was so appealing at that time?
I think it was just acceptance.
I think acceptance is the one word that'll sum it up because, you know, when I played football, I was a very, very aggressive football player, and I would try to hurt people. And looking back, I know that it come from a lot of anger, and that was why I was able to display it without getting in trouble. And when I would hurt people, people would talk about it. So it became a mission for me when I played sports. Let's make people talk. And so I think with that, and just kind of wanting to numb myself, you know, when I would go to those feelings or go to that spot in my life, I would just want to numb it. And I think between, if I couldn't hit you with a helmet on, I wanted to, you know, pour over it, you know, or something. But I think at the end of the day, I just wanted to be the cool kid. I wanted the chicks to like me. I wanted my friends, I wanted the dudes to, you know, want to like me and hang out with me. And, you know, I was the guy that when people would go get in fights and they were scared, they'd always come get me. You know, hey, we're going to get you. And that made me feel powerful. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's fun because I can use those words now because I didn't know them then. But looking back, it was I guess, you know, acceptance and power. At the end of the day, I mean, you know, I wanted you to know I'm bigger than you and I'll wear your head out because it made me feel something. And I look back now and that was some of the dumbest moments of my life, you know? But I think power and acceptance, man.
Yeah.
I think that's the end all.
And that makes sense. You know, just how you broke it down there, that makes sense why you gravitated towards those people and why drugs and alcohol were so appealing. And so you mentioned you had the opportunity to go get a free education, to play ball, squandered that away doing drugs. You had to go straight to work. So after high school, you go into the workforce. Did the drug use continue as well?
Yeah, because the first job that I legally had after high school, one of the guys I got really close with was a drug dealer, and he worked with me. And so I didn't know it when I first started going to work there, but we got to work. The longer we worked together, we started getting closer and closer. And here's the funny part: it's like he and I were working in a warehouse. It was just he and I that day. I had a bad toothache, and I was complaining about it. And he said, "Well, I got something that'll numb it up for you." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "What is it?" He said, "Just dip your finger and just lick your finger, dip it in here, and put it on your tooth." He said, "It'll numb it up." Even as a teenager, I mean, I didn't even ask what it was, but I was just like, you know, at this point, it's going to make it feel better. So I did that, and it numbed my tooth. Not long after, I feel like I was sitting there, my eyes started juking and jiving. You know, I'm like, "Oh God!" I said, "Can I get some more of that for my tooth?" You know, and so that led to conversations. I ended up hanging out with him at his lake house, drinking, and then I noticed he'd be getting these little baggies and you know this and that, and it piled from there. And he was the drug dealer. We hung out all the time. I didn't have to pay for drugs. You know, I mean, it was there. And again, I think acceptance is a big thing in my life, and I'm just even in this conversation, I'm realizing a lot of that because looking back at it, even then, I just wanted to be accepted. I want to be that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just trying to fill a void. You know.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the classic storyline with drugs, right? You know, it is, you know, an easy way to get I'm gonna call it a false sense of acceptance, right? Because it is so surfacey and shallow in that way. So you build this relationship with your coworker and the drug use, it sounds like just really kind of goes to another level here. So how did that end up affecting this next phase of your journey here, Jason?
Well, it kind of played right into it in a sense, I guess, because it was in 1997. I was at work, and one of the workers that it was a temp, you day help temp. We used to talk about wrestling all the time. Well, he comes in one day and he had a little business card. He goes, "Jason, look what I found." And he says, "Right here in Greenville." And I looked at it and it said, "WWC, do you want to be a star?" And I thought, I didn't even know a lot about independent wrestling at that time. I remember going to one years ago, but we joked about it and clowned it, and but I didn't know nothing about it. So I was like, I took it home, I threw it on the dresser. It was several weeks later, man. I was just laying there, I was kind of bored, and I started kind of cleaning up, and I saw this card. So I picked it up and I called it. And where I lived at, it was literally only like 7 or 8 miles from my house where they were doing this pro wrestling tryouts. And I don't know, do you know who Brody Chase is?
Haven't heard that name. Nope.
Old school enhancement talent back in the day. And he's wrestled the likes of Ric Flair and all these guys. He was kind of a George South type of wrestler, back in NWA days. And it was him and a good friend of mine that I'm still close with, Mickey Campbell. He went by Extreme Dream Mickey Free. And they would do tryouts. It's going to cost me $300 to try out. So I paid it. Went there, man, they beat the fire out of me, bro. Like, I would throw up, pass out, get up and do it again. So I began my wrestling career there. And I trained, and I started doing local indies. And the longer that I was in the business, I would start learning the backside of the business. And the backside of the business, there was a lot of drugs in the locker room. There are a lot of women in the locker rooms, and it just piled and piled and piled. So I ended up married in 1998 to my first wife. That was about the same time I started wrestling. I started in 97 training, but actually getting in the rings and going locally, it was about 1998. And I was married, and that was not good. Now, the wrestling business for a married man is, AJ Styles is probably the one person that I know personally that maintained it. Him and Wendy have been together for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
From the time he started to everything. He's a good Christian guy, still humble, even with all his success. He's awesome, phenomenal person. No pun intended. But it's just wasn't a place for a marriage, man. I mean, it's not. If you plan on keeping a marriage, you better have a good God foundation. Because outside of that, man, I say even now, man, the enemy is all over that business.
Yep.
All over that business. And I entertained him for a long time. Even with my first wife, I was sneaking around with girls outside after shows. Now, I still had a wind-band on, man. I remember girls coming up to me, trying to hook up with me, and I'd be like, I'm married. She's like, well, I didn't ask you to marry me. It just made it that accessible, And when it become that accessible, it's just, the sex become a drug too.
Yep.
But I don't know yet. So anyway, that's where it compiled up, and I kept doing more and more drugs. Ended up divorced from my first wife. Her response to me was she was tired of raising 2 kids on her own, because I had 2 daughters with her, and I was always going on weekends, working full-time jobs through the week, just trying to pay dues and make it, And when I get close enough to make it, I was in talks with Puerto Rico, and I was having conversations, and I was going over payment money. How's if they wanted me to come over there for 6 months, and if I was over there, they was going to pay me and this and that. When my first wife found that out, she made me choose between wrestling and her. I'd done what I thought was the commendable thing, and I chose her. Only for 3 to 4 months later, she left anyway. She stayed long enough to mess up everything I was working on. But so that's how I ended up in my first divorce.
What was that like, Jason, before we move on? What was that like becoming a father? Again, just you experiencing what you experienced throughout your childhood, especially those first 9-10 years. now having the opportunity to really, shape, these young people's lives and give them what you never had. Did you see the opportunity in that, or with the drug use and the hunger to make it in the wrestling business, did you maybe kind of lack in that area?
Well, for starters, I became a father July 20th, 2001 for the first time. And it was the most amazing thing ever. Like, I remember, building the nursery and getting it all fixed up. And I would spend, before she was even born, I would go in there and just lay in the floor. Sorry, man. This is probably gonna be terrible.
That's okay. That's the power of editing.
Right, so, and they know I'm in here, so why not take it off? What was that?
You said building the nursery, laying on the floor.
Sorry, dude. I'm so distracted right now.
No, that's okay. I understand.
I apologize.
You're good.
So yeah, I would lay on the floor and just smell like baby powders and baby lotions, man. I wanted, and I would just sit there and wonder, what kind of dad am I going to be? I mean, I was excited, scared, but you know, when she got here, it was just my whole life flipped. I had what I felt like was some sort of purpose, and I tried to be a good father. I mean, let me say this: I never lacked in loving my children. A lot of times, I would lack in showing my kids, and by showing when I was there, I showed them, but I was missing a lot. I was going on the weekends and working all week, and after work, I'd have to go to wrestling practice and and do that. And then on the weekends, I was gone from Friday night till sometimes Sunday. So then it's back to work again. So I was never an absent father, but I wasn't full time. I wasn't fully engaged with my time, and I believe that was the beginning of pushing people away. But looking back, wrestling became my god. Literally, I mean, like, I didn't care whose feelings I hurt. I was going to wrestle. I didn't care who liked it. I was going to wrestle. Well, I didn't care what family function we had to go to. I won't be there. I'm going to wrestle. And it eventually destroyed my marriage. But at the first daughter, and then in '01, my second daughter came in '03. And at this time, I was in the process of taking time off of wrestling. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a better shot at this one. Well, then just life in general overwhelming. 2 kids now, only 23 months apart, busy working. I started drinking again. I always went to something to make me feel or not feel. So the drinking got really bad at this time, to the point I would drink and pass out. I wouldn't help my ex-wife. I wouldn't help her do nothing I wouldn't help her with the kids. I wouldn't help her clean house. I wouldn't help cook. I was not a husband. I became an exhausted drunk. And after that, I ended up back on the weed. It's a cycle, man. Again, this. Drug addicts have cycles. They go through this big cycle where I want to get high all the time. Now I'm tired of getting high. I'm gonna get drunk all the time. Now I'm gonna get drunk all the time. Now I'm tired of doing. I'm gonna take pills all the time, and I'm gonna smoke weed. And it becomes a circle for me. At least for me, it became a circle. I was always addicted to something, just depending on what time of year it was. You know,
Yep.
so I ended up pushing her out the door. I mean, yeah, I tell people all the time, my first divorce, I deserved that. I was not a faithful husband. I was not a good husband. But even in the midst of all that, I did try to be a father. My kids were always a priority. I just had a crazy way of fixing mine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So man, you get divorced, and again, like you mentioned, that cycle of I I got to be using something to kind of deal with these feelings, whether it's alcohol or weed or drugs or pills. And so after that first divorce, did that did that intensify, or what did that do for you?
Yeah, it definitely intensified. I went on a spree of bar hopping, you know, laying down with whoever lay down. And it was just, well, for starters, when I went through that first divorce, at the beginning of that, she wouldn't let me. She tried to keep my kids, and legally I couldn't do nothing at that moment. So it drove me to want to numb myself again. So then again, I became a dude. I was drinking every single night, every Tuesday. I was in different at a bar, and happy hour, whatever. And every opportunity I got, I did it. And again, I went back to the drinking cycle until I got tired of it, and then the wheel started spinning again. Between alcohol, pills, marijuana, and speed, those were the four choices for me, and that was my wheel. Literally, it was a wheel. It just depended on what I was dealing with at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was definitely a big downfall for me. But again, I also believe that you got to hit bottom sometimes before you can realize things. And I encountered Jesus in the midst of some of this. When I say I encountered him, I tried to manipulate him. I tried to use him to get what I wanted. So it was kind of, I started going to church so that my ex-wife would see me at church. So somebody would see me and they would say, "Hey, look at Jason. He's doing good." And the whole time I was, God, please restore my marriage. Please fix this. Please fix that. And I was doing nothing for him. And he knows that. I was just using him as a wish genie. I'd rub him when I needed him and put him away on the shelf when I didn't. It was almost like God, if you do this, I'll serve you. And he's like, "No, you serve me, and I might do that.
Yep.
Serve me first." I didn't know that then, though.
Right. And so you mentioned, Jason, kind of the importance in a way of going to your rock bottom. And so what was your rock bottom? What was the moment where you were just like, all right, this it can't get any worse than this?
Well, I had a couple of them, and I tell people that first rock bottom was just halfway down. I had just hit a side boulder, you know, because it wasn't until going on almost 4 years ago that I really hit bottom. So let me go from here. So I went from the divorce, not handling it, and I ended up meeting my son's mama. When I met her, the the alcohol and everything slowed down. I actually stopped. It became an occasional thing, right? But I fell in love with her, and she and I were together almost 7 years. And I'd smoked weed through there, but that was about it. I had gotten more mature in my drug activity, I guess, where I was a functional drug addict now. I would still take pills, I would still smoke weed, but I would get up and go to work. And long story short, ended up I had my son with her, and we ended up divorced when he was. It's funny because when my son was 2, it's when we got divorced. That's when my mom and my dad got divorced too.
Yeah.
Is it my son played an instrumental part in saving my life now? And it's just when I see these things like with him being 2, me being 2, I see me growing up again, but I refuse to let him do what I did. he'll hate me first. I'm not. I won't sit back but my son's you met him. He's a good kid, man. He's
Yeah.
I see so much of me in him, and sometimes it's a little intimidating. It's a little scary because I know who I was, but at the same time, I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as much worried about it.
Yep.
So,
So you mentioned kind of having two rock bottoms there, Jason. The first one was, kind of like a side boulder. What was that?
the side boulder.
Yep.
The side boulder was the divorce, the first divorce, and that was. I remember standing in the courtroom with her on the day of the final divorce, and we ended up in the elevator together. And I remember looking at her. I said, I said, we don't have to do this. I said, it's not final until we walk through that door. I said, why don't we leave? Let's fix it. Let's just, to heck with the lawyers, to heck with the judge. Let's just go. She said, no, this is what I need. Fair enough. I don't even remember the hearing. I zoned out. I just, and it was, the bad part is I went in there with no lawyer. She had a lawyer, I didn't. And I just went in there doing this.
Shaking your head.
She wants this. Okay. You get visitations like this. Okay. I didn't care. And it's sad when I think about it now because I didn't care because I was so obsessed with wanting her. If it wasn't her, if I didn't have her, I didn't want nothing. And so that was the first bottom I hit, or the first boulder I hit. Then I fast forward to my second wife when I went through that divorce. That one hit hard because I worked really hard on my second marriage, not to be that guy that I was in the first one. But when we ended up splitting up, she ended up getting on drugs after we divorced. And I spent the first part of my separation trying to help her. She was with another guy, ended up, she got strung out on drugs. And at this moment, I didn't understand why, because this was not the woman that I'd met, right? And so I spent all this time, and I was still raising my two girls, which I had custody of by this time, and my son. And everybody would always say, like, Jason, I don't know how you do it. It's like you're super dad. And super dad puts a lot of weight on your shoulders. It puts you on a pedestal way up here. So when you fall, you got a lot further way to fall. And people look at it different. Because, picture your hero that you had when you was a kid, and you walk and you meet him in an alley somewhere. He's a smart aleck jerk and he smokes a cigarette. That's your Superman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was kind of that, because when the super dad weight got heavy, I got in my mind and I started, why would she leave? These kids, this family, why would she leave? And it made me want, she got hooked on meth. And I'm like, what is so good about that drug that she would just leave this? I don't get it. Well, I ended up finding out. And I was on pain pills really bad. And I was trying to quit doing pain pills. But I don't know if you've ever done any drugs or not, but when you try to come off of pain pills, man, there's a withdrawal, like shakes, sweats, muscle spasms. It was just miserable. And I couldn't kick it. At this time, my cousin smoked meth. I didn't even know a lot about meth. And so I'm talking to him about wanting to get off the pills. He says, well, why don't you just smoke meth through the withdrawal section of it. And then he said, because, meth don't have no withdrawals, you just quit. And I was so stupid, gullible, and desperate. I was like, okay. Oh, he's right. Meth don't have any withdrawals. But here's the problem. When you start doing it, you stay up 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and you crash. When you get up, you're so tired from crashing so long, you got to have a pick-me-up. You get back on a hamster wheel. And so that's where I started in that. Well, then I ended up moving into an apartment complex, met a guy there. He became like a best friend to me. And lo and behold, he's a drug dealer too. The thing is, dude, the enemy always took me up. It was like, hey, if I'm going to get you, I know you ain't going to spend all this money on it, but I'm going to put it where you ain't got to. And he put it right in front of my face. I mean, next thing I know, man, I was living in an apartment, man, and it was an immaculate apartment. And within 3 or 4 months, I didn't physically kick my girls out, but I done pushed them out. They didn't want to be there. My son was staying at his grandparents'. I was strung out on meth. I ended up trapping my whole apartment out. I had tons of people in here, just selling drugs, doing drugs. And there I was. Then I got in with this guy. Then I got involved with Mexican cartels.
Oh, man.
Bro. So now Mexican cartel, there was this one night, my buddy calls me and he goes, I know for starters, I had been up for almost 9 days.
Wow.
No sleep. I was seeing shadow people. And he calls me, he goes, Jason, he said, you still got that piece I gave you, which was a gun. And I said, yeah. He said, well, next time you come by, I'll bring it by. To me, at that moment in my life, that was code. I took it as code, like, hey, man, I need you. So I'll roll up, walk in this house, triggered back. My buddy's here, the head Mexican cartel guy sitting beside him, and that guy's muscle sitting over here on a stool. And I walked in and I was like, what's up? Blah, 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 blah. And cocked the pistol. And this muscle guy stood up and started speaking Spanish to me. So, I mean, like cussing me or going off on me in Spanish. And I walked dead up to his face and put a pistol to his head. I said, if you're going to speak to me, you're in America. You better speak English. And my buddies are, Jason, stop. And he said, we're cool. He said, I was just going to sell him the gun. I was like, oh my God, I misread that one. So the head cartel guy started laughing hilariously. He loved me. He loved that side of me.
Yeah.
He accepted me for who I was.
There it is again.
Yeah. So I started talking with him, and I would start seeing him more. And then he started offering to pay me to drive him around. So now I start off driving him around. He'd slip me $500, a bag full of drugs, whatever, just to drive. Wasn't doing nothing. Well, next thing you know, I'm trafficking meth, 2 kilos of meth from Atlanta, Georgia to Greenville, South Carolina. I don't know if you realize that's lifetime sentences right there.
Yeah.
So, now he's paying me more money to do that. Now I'm driving down the road, and when I go on those trips, he wouldn't let me have my gun. But him and his muscle had guns behind me. So it's like I was right, almost I wasn't at gunpoint, but it was kind of like, don't mess up.
Yeah.
And I remember running from the police, man, and I went, and then running from the cops, and then it become, hey, look, we got to go collect some money. So I was kicking doors in, beating people up that I never met before. I mean, dude, I still see some of these people in my mind, even to this day. Just bust it all up, and I was a bad person, man, and I don't say that with no ego and no boastfulness. I became a bad person. And I was doing just doing stuff that was just, I should be in prison. That's why, I tell people I should be dead or in prison. I remember being in a motel woods going to collect money and it turned into a gunfight. I remember, putting mattresses up against the windows, and
Wow.
it was just, I'm telling you, man, I've never been to jail, Terry.
That is a miracle, dude.
Yes, it's all God's favor, man. It's all God's hand on me. He knew what he's doing with me now. And he couldn't do what he's doing with me now if I was scathed. He had to put his hand in it so that, to protect what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I didn't know God was chilling me in the hood, but he was.
Yep.
He wasn't okay with what I was doing, man, but he knew one day. It became that, and I was trying to get out, but I don't know if you know a lot of the rules of the Mexican cartel.
I don't, but I'm guessing that there's a lot of them and none of them are good.
Yes, and a lot of times if you try to get out, they try to kill your family. And so I was kind of stuck. But here's the funny part: was like I told you, I'd gotten close with the head guy, and he used to ask me all the time. And here's the funny when I look back at it now. He would go, "Jason, why are you doing this, man?" He said, "That's not you. It's not you. These people don't even know me." But it makes me think, and it makes me even, what if? What if that was God
Yeah.
working through this guy? What are you doing? This ain't you. But this head cartel guy was telling me this, right? And I ended up getting COVID, and I was in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, I met up with him. I owed him like $4,500 that I owed him. He looked at me. He said, "Go home to your family. Take care of you. You have a clean slate with me, but don't ever show back up."
Wow.
I got blessed out of the Mexican cartel.
And that doesn't happen.
And I owed him money. That, for one, you don't owe these guys money. Don't owe them. But he blessed me out owing him money. And he pretty much, the reason he told me I don't ever see you back again is because he didn't want me there.
Yeah.
Because he knew it wasn't me. And, man, it's funny, man. I really do think that was God, man. God used a head cartel dude to speak to me. Dude,
That's
what are you doing?
That's just evidence. Yeah, that's just evidence that God uses everything, right, man?
Yeah.
Like he can use anything to reach the lost.
Right. That's amazing though, man.
Man. And so you mentioned wanting to leave the cartel. You got blessed out. And when we were at the retreat, you shared this experience that you had where and I'd like you to go into detail, but basically strung out on drugs. And then, this is almost kind of where you got saved. This is where you encountered Jesus again. So walk us through that, Jason. How long after getting blessed out of the cartel did this particular event happen?
Okay, so after that, I ended up pause. I ended up okay. So after the cartel incident, I ended up losing everything. I had like $200,000 in the bank. Okay, within 12 months, I was evicted, and I was living in my car. So I went from being high dollar Jason to sleeping in my Nissan Armada. So everybody that did love me at that moment started taking their hands off of me. I didn't have nowhere to go. So I went to my first ex-wife's mama's house, which is where my daughter was staying at the time. She sat and had this long conversation with me, and she's wanting to help me. So we start looking up drug rehabs. I found this one place. It was a place called Evans Training Center. And these guys it was a double wide trailer. They had 13 beds, and it was a Christian faith-based. And I had emailed them. Everybody else wanted insurance. It was on waiting list. It was just impossible to get in. But I was at a place I didn't have nowhere to go because nobody was letting me move in because of what I was doing. Nobody was letting me stay, nothing. But I spent the night at my ex-mother-in-law's house this night, and I emailed that Evans Trainer group. Within 15 minutes, I had my phone rung. It was that guy. He starts talking to me about Jesus on the phone. And I'm just, yes, okay. Didn't care. Okay. And so he said, all right. He said, we'll accept you, but you have to be here by 11 a.m. tomorrow. Nothing, no questions. I'm like, okay. So told my ex-mother-in-law, she drove me down. We left the next morning. I stopped by my dad's house, and I left my car at my dad's house, all my stuff packed up in it, and told him where I was going. I left, and that morning they dropped me off, and it was an in-house 8-month rehab. So I went there, got a lot of help. Ended up getting sober, obviously, because I was there, and that was tough. That whole meth don't have side effects was a lie. It was a whole bold-faced lie, and because it was rough. But I stayed there, and I was only there for about 3.5 months, and I started getting itchy, so I dipped out, and I didn't complete it. I thought I got enough foundational tools. I'm good. I'm sober. I'm good. I had cut off everybody in my drug world except one person, my best friend, the drug dealer.
Mm.
The only guy you need.
Yep.
So when I come home, it's funny because all my ex-in-laws seem to love me. My second wife, I moved in. I started staying with her parents, for a little while, and I started hanging out with my buddy. So then I started drinking, and my ex-mother-in-law, she's mentioned something about me drinking. She goes, you drink an awful lot. I'm like, well, you just never really saw me drink a lot. If I drink 6 beers, it's a lot. So, but in my soul, I'm thinking, oh man, they noticed, they found out. So then I started smoking weed again. Then I started hanging out with my buddy again. I wouldn't do the meth. He'd make everybody put it up when I got there. And when I'd get there, everybody else is spun out, and I'm looking around like, this ain't even fun right now. I was like, well, I'll just do it this weekend. I'll do it this weekend. Next thing I was in full-blown relapse. Boom, that fast. One person, boom. And I remember it was the weekend of my birthday. Me, that guy, and a whole bunch of other people. We had a what they call a motel block party. Couple bedrooms, joining rooms, just drugs, tattoos. I mean, it's just a huge party. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I done smoked so much meth again, I can't even get high. So I started snorting heroin. Now I'm snorting heroin, something I said I would never do. And I remember, if you get a double-bedded room, how you got the little nightstand in the middle. I was on the door, close to the door of that bed near the nightstand. And I remember I woke up and I was looking around the room, and I saw everybody just kind of passed out, drooling. It was just nasty, man. And I remember making eye contact with myself in the mirror. And I said, So this is what you're doing now. This is what you're going to do. This is your life. Your kids told you if you ever do anything else, they'll, cut you off. And this is where you're at. And I knew then that was the beginning of a conversation with Jesus. And so he planted that in me, right? And so when my friend that I was with woke up, he and my best friend drug buddy had a falling out. Long story short, all this commotion I ended up getting into physical altercations with half the room. And what I didn't realize then was that was God cutting everybody off. That was my last one. So I left. I went home to my apartment. And I remember going in there and I was angry. I was upset. I was crying. I remember, laying into my bed screaming out to God, if you want me to stop doing drugs, you got to do something. I can't do this by myself. I said, me without you doing something, I'm a junkie. I can't stop. I've tried to stop. I can't stop and I won't stop. So if you want me, fix me. I mean, it's almost like I gave him an ultimatum.
Yeah.
As intense as that sounds, man, because Lord knows now I would not tempt God. But, it was just, I was just at my end of my rope. And I remember laying there and I was tossing, I was turning. I've been on drugs for the past 3 or 4 days. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to smoke. On my dresser, I had like a box that I kept all the tools and the drugs in. I rose up in the bed and I said, I'm going to smoke some weed so I can go to sleep. But Terry, when I rose up in the bed, I felt the physical hand of God on my shoulder. And he said, lay down, I'm not done. People think I exaggerate the story, bro. But when I tell you, I felt the hand of God on my shoulder. And whether I heard an audible voice or it spoke to my spirit or however it said, I heard the words, I'm not done with you yet. So I laid down and I just cried myself to sleep. I woke up the next morning and I'm looking around the room and I'm like, I don't feel no different. Nothing's changed. So now I'm ticked off at God. You said you wasn't done, but you ain't did nothing. That's my thought process. All I remember is my feet hit the floor when I was getting ready to get up, because I was like, now I'm going to go smoke meth, just get back on the wagon and just screw it, And I remember my feet touching the floor. The next time I could realize what I was doing, I was standing over a toilet that was already flushed, where I had dumped the whole bag of drugs in. Almost $300 or $400 worth of drugs. Flushed. I had no idea that I'd done that. I turned and I saw myself in the mirror and I spoke out loud. I used to talk to myself a lot. I said, what did you just do? And then I felt the Spirit of God come over me. He said, you're 5 days clean right now. If you start over, you'll have to go back. You'll have to start over. And it hit me. 5 days? I just fell asleep last night. Bro, it's like I didn't exist for 5 days. Long enough to get the withdrawals out.
Wow.
For days. I didn't have a missed text. I didn't have a missed call. Nothing. It's like Jason Justice did not exist for 5 days. And I was like, I sit there just like you just said. I was just like, wow. And he said, just be patient, one day at a time. And that was almost 4 years ago. And I tell people, I'm not clean. I'm cleansed. There's a difference. I was delivered from drugs that day. Delivered. I've not had a taste for a drug since.
Praise God.
He took it out. Like, I don't know how that happens, because I know who I was. Jason can tell you, Terry, I love to get high. I love it. I thought I did. But I don't have that desire. That desire is nowhere near me. I have been around people smoking weed and walked away, you know, I mean, it's fun. I'm referred to as the preacher guy now. You know, it's funny how the situation of life changes, you know. But yeah, God took it away, and I've gave him praise ever since, man. I gave my life to Christ that in that moment. I was like, okay. I tapped out, bro. All right, man. It's so real to me now, just talking about it, because I remember that weight, bro. That weight come off. I was free. I was loved, and I was accepted.
There it is again. Yep. Come on.
Nobody. There's a song I know, it's just popped in my head. Nobody do me like Jesus. Can't nobody do me like Jesus, man. But so I accepted Christ, man, and you know, I'm brand new then. So I went in church, and my son's mama, it was, you know, probably a week or so later, my son's mama, she calls me and she said, Jason, she said, I want to ask you a question. So I want to ask you a favor. She said, you're probably not going to want to do it, but I got to ask you just because Mason wants me to ask you. And Mason's my son. He said, she said, Mason wants to know if you'll come to church with us tomorrow. And I said, yeah, tell him I'll be there. And I went to church, and I've not missed a Sunday since, unless I was ministering somewhere. But the church I'd started at, it was one of these churches that have a lot of the music, loud music, so, you know, that type of thing. I'm not a Bible scholar, Terry. You know what I mean? I mean, it's hard for me to sit here and quote scriptures to you, but I can, in the right moments, the scriptures come. It's crazy. And but I remember starting this church, and the only way I would really connect with God was through worship. And as long as music was playing, I could get in my spirit, what I felt was my spirit at the time, and connect. But when that stopped, I didn't know how to connect. You know, it was like, so now I'm realizing, is this me and God, or is it me and emotions, or me and feelings, you know? So I started, a guy I went to high school with, he's a preacher, you know, on another side of the town. And he had a school, was called RLA, which is Rejuvenate Leadership Association. It's a Christian leadership program that you learn kingdom principles. You know, I never even knew the word kingdom. I just thought it was just God, let's get saved and go home. You know, I didn't know all this kingdom talk. And so I got kind of interested in this, and I'm like, I need to learn. So I signed up for this class for this 2-year course. And the more I got into that class, I started feeling God pull me to that church. And it was like he was telling me, I've got to line your ministry up with what you're doing. God called me to prison ministry, which I've yet to do, but that's what I'm called to. And in order to get in prisons, you got to have certain certifications and this type of thing. So by that, I actually graduate this December. So when I get done, I'll have my certificate in ministry and whatever else I need to get into the prisons, right? And I've learned so much through this past 2 years, man. But so I ended up shifting churches. And it was hard for me because I had started going to church regularly with my son, his mama, and her husband, and his stepbrother. And because we're all like really close now. I mean, we're like best friends. So
Praise God.
I'm at my ex-in-law's house with my ex-wife and her husband outside right now at this moment.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah. So, and plus she started going to school this year too. So same class I'm taking.
Yeah.
But it's just how God works, man.
Yep.
But I got pulled to that church, and when I first started going to this church, Terry, the music was not what it was where I came from. I mean, you had like a TV band over here, and when I in the church when I come over here, it was just like a lot different. It wasn't that style of music. It was just, when I first got there, I was regretting it because my only connection was through music. But between my class and staying, God started revealing things to me. He was shifting me at that moment because the music worship was just my foundation of getting me in the house. He got me in the house. Now he's going to teach me how to serve him without a feeling. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I started to shift, and in between learning, all this kingdom stuff in my classes and attending this church and it's just different, and they speak in tongues and things and stuff that I wasn't really familiar with and this and that, but I've learned so much about it. And so then I gravitated to this church, and now at the time my son, they were still going to the other church, they was doing a Christmas play. So I went to watch him do this thing at the church. And Terry, I didn't realize how much I had changed until I got there. When I got there, as the music was playing, I got in, my worship, and I look around, and there's a couple of kids next to me, and bro, they're looking at me like, "What is wrong with this guy?" My worship had grown. I was actively worshiping. A lot of these people there, man, they just raised their hands, and it's almost like I scared this kid, right? But I realized then, because I felt out of place there. It was like I was in a foreign country, and that was what I used to call home. And that's how God used that to show me my growth. Not saying nothing bad about that church, just me as a person and what I was going through. And it was amazing. So when I went back to my church, I had a deeper appreciation. I had a deeper desire, a deeper thirst. And before I knew it, my son's mama and her husband, they all started seeing the changes that was in my life. They decided they wanted to shift. So now they shifted, right? So now we all go to church together every Sunday, every chance we get. And I'm active in my church. I serve, I do. It's just amazing, man, because now the growth has really started. And sometimes I find myself getting hard on myself, and God start God He shows me, look, dude, you're growing. You're still a baby. I mean, in God's eyes, I'm only almost 4 years old, so I'm still learning. I'm still learning life. I'm still learning kingdom. I'm still learning how to walk. I'm still learning how to talk. How to change, change my mindset. Instead of looking at everything in a negative mindset, trying to think of the positive that comes out of it. What can I learn through this? God, teach me about me. What do you want to show me through this? And I'm sure I've squirreled way off of what you even asked me, but
You're good, man.
it's been an amazing ride, man. And I ain't even peaked, and it's not about me, man. It's not about me. And that's where I'm in a spot now where God is showing me it's about me and the kingdom, Jason. When I use this, I don't mean this literally. I'm nothing. I'm something because he chose me and he made me. But man, our lives are built for the kingdom. And the best thing I've ever learned is when God made us and he formed us, you realize he formed us perfect. We're formed perfect, but because of the sin of the world, it's tainted. So if we would learn to live from the inside out, versus outside in. Everything that God made us capable to do is built inside us already. All we got to do is water it, draw it out, draw it out. Man, I don't think people realize, and I'm one of the main ones, you don't realize what you have inside you. You don't know your capabilities. If God gives you a thought, he will give you the capability to do it. I mean, it's just, there's so, and I'm learning that I've tapped into some things inside me, you know, and it's stuff that I never thought what I would do or say, but I know that there's so much more, and it just makes me hungry. You know, it makes me thirsty. Like I want, you know, what else can I do? What else can you do through me? You know, and we went to that youth retreat, man, I learned that day. Do you remember the little girl? I think her name was Breland.
Yep.
That girl touched my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, man, she made me realize that my story matters. My story matters, you know, because sometimes, you know, Terry, I'll be honest, it's almost like it gets repetitive. And I don't get tired of sharing it because I love sharing what God's done. But it's like, I want to be more than that. I want to be more than just my testimony. I want to be, you know, when I say I want God to use me. I'm trying to kick my I habit, you know, because it's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to say, "Oh, he can preach great. He can talk this. He can do this great." If it becomes that, it becomes about performance. I don't want to be that.
Yep.
I don't want to be that. I want my life to show without anything, you know. And I don't know, man. I was listening to my preacher was talking the other day, and he got to talking about Jesus, you know, and a lot of the American church today, it becomes a performance for everybody, for a lot of people. And he started giving instances of Jesus, you know. He said, "Do you think?" I don't remember reading nowhere in the book where it said Jesus was hooping at a high sign and hollering and cheering. Jesus, you want to be healed? Be healed. You know, it's just kind of chill, you know. Okay, be healed. Boom. You know, I understand we all get excited sometimes, but that at a certain point that becomes about you and your performance. You know, I don't know. It's amazing because I can see when God starts to shift in my life, and I've never been able to see that. It's almost like the knob changes. It's just boom. When he works on pride, boom. He wants to work on anger. He wants to work on, you know. And I'm in the midst of a shift right now, so that's probably why I'm all tongue tied, because he's literally switching my brain. He's at a mindset for me now. Now he's working on my mindset. He's working on the way I see things. You know, I've been praying, you know, God, give me your eyes. You know, I want to see people like you see people. You know, I've always been kind of short. I won't say short tempered. I don't like a lot of stupidity irritates me. I mean, I don't know, just, you know, the lack of common sense irritates me, and I'm trying, because even those people that, I mean, they need Jesus too, and he loves them, and I'm trying to learn to be more empathetic. Is that the word I'm looking for? Empathetic.
Yep.
So I want to be more empathetic so that I know what to, you know, I can be empathetic with a drug addict because I know what it feels like. I know how it feels like to want to be sober and can't. You want to be sober so bad, but you just can't quit. I've been there. But I'm here to tell you, if anybody gets anything from this, I was strung out, running with gangs, doing stupid stuff. I was shaking hands with the devil when Jesus found me. He wasn't never lost. It was me. You know, he was always right on time.
Yeah.
I want somebody to have hope, man. You know, I'm 300 pounds, bald, tattooed. I look like hell, but I love like Jesus.
I love that. I love that, man. Jason, Your story is absolutely incredible. And like you said, like this needs to be made into a movie because it, again, I don't even have words. Like you got me kind of tongue tied. Like this has been so amazing just getting this opportunity to sit down with you and hear, kind of the fullness of your story here. And man, what Jesus has done in your life.
Yeah, I owe everything to him, man. I mean, I couldn't be. I I have never been more grateful. And I hear people all the time, man. I thank God for a second chance. I said, you only at number two? Oh, way I passed two a long time ago. I thank God for another chance every day. When I wake up every morning, man, I try to let that be the first thing I say. I tell God, God, thank you for another chance to try to get this right. Thank you for another day, another opportunity. Send somebody my way.
Yeah.
Let me tell them.
Yeah. And Jason, I see it and I hear it, just that fire within you. Like you're burning for Jesus now. Like you said, your hunger, your thirst is for him now. And man, he's just getting started with you. It seems like you're in a season now of preparation and being equipped with these tools to go into these prisons. And that's gonna come to a culmination in December, which
Right.
congratulations early, but that's a huge deal, man. I'm excited, dude. When you step foot into those prisons, man, the atmosphere is going to shift, not because of you, but because of the Holy Spirit in you. You're coming with power, you're coming with authority, and God is going to use you in ways beyond your imagination. I even as we're talking, I just see prisons breaking out in worship and just dance and sing because of you and what you're bringing to them. You're bringing life, you're bringing the Savior to them. And so, dude, I'm excited for what God has in store for you as you go into that journey. Jason, how can people follow along with that? Where can they find you on social media?
Well, I mean, right now it's funny. I get to ask that question a lot. I guess maybe I need to try to do something, but I guess I've been so focused on just trying to get to the journey. I guess that I'm I got Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's Jason Justice. I'm terrible with plugs, man. That's part of my growth too. I gotta learn to promote not necessarily myself, but God threw me on a platform. But
Well,
I'm
I'll link your social media handles in the show
yeah,
notes and in the comments so people can find it there too.
I do that. Look, I want to tell you something funny. When I first got called to prison ministry, right? It happened to me in a dream, and like literally, I had like a 3-second dream. It was pitch black, bright white words, prison ministry. And I just felt the calling on my life, and so I started questioning God. Are you sure? I've never been to jail. I don't never been to prison. You know what he says to me? He said to me, "You never been to prison because I had my hand on you and you didn't get caught." He said, "You look the part, you talk the part, they can relate with you. I look like an inmate. A lot of people think I've done time because it's just the perception I give off, but I've never gone to jail cell. And that's the irony of this. He's putting me somewhere uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. But you know what happens with that? The more uncomfortable we are, the more glory he gets. Because it ain't about me then. I mean,
Amen.
he's going to put me in the midst of, and I'm going to sit there with my mouth tongue tied, and all of a sudden, spirit's going to kick in. And it's going to be over with. So I love it, man. I accept it. I take it on.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason, again, this has been incredible. I'm so thankful that man, just doing the interview with Chad and then doing the Remnant Youth Retreat has led to this connection. And man, you got a brother in Christ and me that's going to be championing you and supporting you along in this ministry you're going to be starting up soon. And thank you so much, man, for being gracious with your time and just being real and raw and vulnerable. I know your story is going to touch so many people's lives and it's going to encourage them, inspire them that man, if you've been able to get through what you've been through, and here you are, restored and redeemed and living for Jesus, there isn't an excuse for anyone else. There's really not. And so I'm just, man, just so thankful for this. Thank you.
I want to leave you with 3 R's. 3 R's: rescued, restored, redeemed.